So, what? Why you said at the beginning that this was the one that was most fun for Penny? Why?
Um, I think because, when we do films like this, we, just hire all our friends and just go make it. And, it was just such a fun adventure. And I mean, the way that, Penny and I are kind of like ma pa grocery store filmmakers because we actually do everything. Like I shoot it, I take sound, I did the editing and directing, whatever. We both did it together. And I don't know, it was a fun adventure. And the band itself, they were just kind of like nice guys. They're very talented, and we really liked them. Became very good friends with them afterwards. But it needed something more, and so actually, the record company suggested, having this contest and getting this group of fans to come along, and that was really interesting for us because half of our interest in it was this whole fan culture that was really special at this point. And it was almost like a type of rebellion or something for suburban kids that were pretty bored and needed something to really react to. And a lot of it wasn't political in the normal political sense, but it was more of an artistic rebellion that they did.
What do you think it was about Depeche Mode that triggered that rebellion?
Probably because their music, spoke to them in a lot of other ways. I mean, the subjects were, not your, I love you baby type of subjects. They were about suicide and S&M and, just a wide range of subjects. They were ready to take on their music company. And, for the music video that we did for this, we did it to Everything Counts, where, they just show how much money they make. And the record company was a little bit worried about doing that. And the band said, no, that's what we want to do.
I mean, they were great because they were just blokes. I mean, they were four friends that just kind of started off wherever they started off in East London. And it's just, they kept it together. I mean, it was just kind of, and the music is so high energy. It just kind of keeps you going.
Yeah, and there is a sunny kind of benevolent, you know what I'm saying? Everybody's having fun. It's kind of unlike the cliche of the rock star, which is more tormented and more inwards. This is just really like kind of direct. Yeah.
I mean, they were all about the fans. That whole tour is all about the fans. Music for the masses.
Uh-huh.
That's what it was all about.
I mean, for me, it was really interesting because it's very different from, when I grew up in the 60s and everybody was kind of in their own space, kind of getting off on their own thing to the music. And, this concert was kind of the beginning ones where people did things kind of en masse, and they had their way that they dressed, and they had the, the waving and hand signals, and, they kind of were a group, groupie fans towards the band, and the band would kind of come into, some small town, and, nobody who would really know who they were or whatever, and they'd take out like all these, this huge amount of money in it. But, the kids, all knew about it, and, were very excited.
There is that thing at the moment at the beginning, kind of towards the beginning, when they say that they're not on radio in every place because they clearly they were playing different music, but if they're on the radio, everybody knows how they were communicating about the concert happening. I mean, how did the kids know that they were coming in, other than the radio?
Yeah, basically the radio in that day and age. I mean, it was pre-internet, so that's how everybody found out about anything.
I mean, it was alternative radio, which is not everywhere. So Long Island has its alternative station, New York City does, but if you go to the Midwest, some places, there is no alternative radio at all, and they never get played.
The film has an on the road dimension, which is also nice, and it's a little different than from other film of yours. So, what was the time span, and how did that on the road and the changing of the places affect the film itself and the filming?
When did we started? We kind of heard about doing it, and really. Penny said Depeche Who. He had no idea who they were, and I think he called up like
none of us did,
we called up like one of our younger members of her family, and they said, "Yeah, do it." So went out and saw them, and were really enamored by the whole fan culture of it, and decided to do it. But I think we filmed over, I don't know, 6 weeks, something like that. And a lot of it just was Penny, myself, and David Dawkins. We filmed a lot of it by ourselves.
And did you spend a lot of time with the kids, with the fans on the bus? And
Yeah, we had 2 friends of ours, filmmakers, Joel DeMont and Jeff Kreines, went on the bus tour with them across the country. And the kids are just great. I mean, the band always said that they're the stars of the movie.
yeah, they actually.
I like to point out that Pam Power is also part of the film crew. She's up there. Just want to give a shout out.
Any question? Oh, hold on for the mic because we.
Thanks. I really love the movie anyway, but one thing in particular that strikes me is that section you did in the beginning, sort of saying why they didn't have a drummer. Like that was really pretty inspired to sort of not bookend, but frame the movie with that idea that it was this one guy playing keyboard that made the percussive sounds. I mean, was that part of, how did that come to be? I just thought that was such a great addition.
I mean, everything just really happened spontaneously. There wasn't anything planned. I mean, we just didn't really know much about synthesizers at that point. And, he just explained it to us and, explained that was the origin of the band, that they didn't have a drummer. They were doing it in their houses and had to be quiet. And so, this type of music was really suited to them. And, they were really one of the pioneering bands doing that type of early synthesizer pop music.
So when you were editing it really, you just chose to use it. You must have had hours. So it was just great that was in there.
Yeah, I mean, the hard part of making this film for me was that, we shot it in 60 millimeter film, so each roll is 10 minutes and then the film runs out and they have to put it back in, which, when Penny and I were on tour and we were both shooting, we didn't have any even camera assistants at that point. And so it was pretty off the cuff. And then editing, this was pre-digital editing. So we edited on Steenbeck film editing machines. And, I had one edit machine that was an 8-plate and it had 2 monitors. So that was, we had, for the Rose Bowl, we had 6 cameras. So, then I would have these other separate ones that I'd put the other rolls on and just try to keep track of how to edit, a song even. I mean, it was a really different era than it is now, where it's really so easy to edit a concert footage. I mean, you can take 6 cameras and just go through and, in 5 minutes, you can have your song.
All I want to do is watch it over and over again.
Buy the Blu-ray.
There was someone.
First of all, thank you for a very interesting, very good film. One could even argue that the documentary was even better than the band was. I mean, the band is a good band, but it was really a very interestingly put together documentary. Like you said, the fan part of it was great. People could argue that the best song the band ever did is The Policy of Truth, which wasn't in this. Was it shot but just wasn't usable, or they hadn't written the song yet?
I don't think they've written the song yet.
Yeah, they hadn't written Personal Jesus, a lot of their bigger hits. I mean, this was really the beginning of this band kind of breaking out. And after this, they became huge. With some really big hits, and their music continued to develop. But they've always had a lot of trouble with British press. I mean, they were never really accepted in their home country in certain ways. I mean, by the audiences they were, but the press was always pretty critical and nasty towards them.
What kind of release did the film get at the time? Because I think it impacted their career, right?
I don't know how much it impacted their career, because they really were going, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how much it really impacted their career. Well, the release was they did the SR system. I don't know really. No.
The theatrical release of the film.
No, I know, but it really didn't get much of a huge theatrical release because it was 2 hours long, and a lot of theaters didn't want to book it. It was really hard for them to get it booked in a lot of theaters, and that was always a contention going into it. It was 90 minutes or 2 hours, but there was too much stuff to make it 90 minutes. So
I mean, the Warners really wanted just to make a concert film, and I didn't want to do that. So, I mean, there's more music in here that I would have put in normally, but, you know, it was a compromise. So, I mean, the film basically showed at midnight screenings around because they couldn't wait to put it on DVD because DVDs were, did they put it on VHS or this was DVD era?
VHS.
Oh, VHS,
you know,
yeah.
probably
'Cause
VHS.
home video and everything, that was the big new thing.
But the filming the fans hasn't been done much before, right? Especially including it in the concert. It just shows a whole. It was kind of pioneering, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think like MTV's Real
Real world, the
Real World
yeah.
or whatever it is, where they, you know, hang out with a bunch of kids. You know, they took a lot of inspiration from this. They said in doing that type of thing.
Yeah, that's like one of the original reality shows, and I think it's 91, 92, so it's only a couple of years later. But they clearly took a lot. Yeah, there's a question there.
I was so pleasantly surprised to see Scott Cohen from Sag Harbor. And I guess he worked for Spin Magazine and he was interviewing them. You must have been so shocked. I mean, you didn't know he was coming, did you?
No. I
Shocking still. It's
Yeah.
so exciting.
Yeah, no,
Anyway,
it's exciting
Scott
for
was
us,
a
too.
Sag Harbor local and he worked for Spin Magazine and that was really nice to see him. He's passed since, so it just was really nice to see him.
The other thing about this film is that Andy Fletcher died this year, so that's a very sad thing, you know, for the band. But they're doing their world tour right now.
Yeah, I think Frazer told, you know, we were thinking of reaching out, and she said that tonight they're in Bratislava, some, you know, they're in Europe. Yeah, they're playing. Yeah.
But they always said about Fletcher's that he was the one who looked the most awkward up there. He couldn't dance. And everybody kind of said he wasn't even sure whether his machine was even plugged in. Because he was kind of the glue that held it all together. That was his job. To be the musician necessarily wasn't.
This is a very dumb question, but electronic music, do you film it different than, because it's a much more still medium, you know, the bodies move different and they are very still. It's a different music. Is there a different way of filming, or it doesn't really matter? I don't know. It feels more geometrical. I was just, as I was looking at the film, I was trying to see how different it was from other, you know, from Monterey Pop or from other live music that you have filmed, or even the Bowie.
Yeah, I mean, you film what's there, and a lot of it, you know, is done in the editing. I mean, I really tried to pay attention to the kind of circular way that the music kind of repeats and gets layered and edit it like that. But I don't know. I was kind of the main frontal camera, so I was pretty busy following David Gahan around the stage. He was the only one really sweating up there.
And it's wonderful, that moment where Penny goes on and you know, he gets him to look at the audience.
But also, what you don't know, it had rained earlier, and that whole slant was all wet.
I'm sorry.
It had rained earlier.
Oh, at the Rose Bowl?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that was very wet. So when he was climbing up that slant, it was a little dicey.
Anybody else?
I don't usually ask this, but since you mentioned that
Hold on.
Penny loved this film, do you, Chris Frazer, have your favorite of your body of work?
I like Company. It's one of my
Uh-huh.
favorite films.
I do not have a favorite exactly.
like,
It's
I
the
know,
old,
it's
you know, which kid do you like better?
Right. It is
Um,
that kind of question. And last question is the restoration. Who did it?
We did it at a lab in New York, and it's a really intense process to go from 16 millimeter film to digital, because even though you're making the film sharper, you're also enlarging the grain and making the grain sharper. So you're
trade-off.
always fighting, you know, the grain, and you're going through all these degraining processes, they get more elaborate each film we do, like AI starts coming in on it, and other new technologies. And even like the coloring of the film affects the grain and the sharpness. So you really need somebody who's a scientist, artist to work with when you do this process. It's very ornate.
There's a question here.
I can speak loud.
No,
You
no.
finally end up saying for the introduction, hello Rose Bowl, hello
Pasadena.
Pasadena.
He said Pasadena.
Which one?
He said Pasadena.
Okay.
It kind of rolls off your tongue better than Rose Bowl.
That's it there.
Yeah, they're a very talented group. What was their background in music? I mean, they weren't, and also, where are they now?
Well, they're touring now.
They're touring now, so they are still. And the fellow that passed was who? Did you say?
Andy Fletcher.
Fletcher. But what was their background? How did they get
They
together?
they
as a
were
group
from Basildon, outside of London. Andy, Martin, and David kind of were initially in the band, and another person who left. And they were a very close knit, and a lot of the people that worked for them were their friends that were the roadies and stuff. And in the beginning, when we were making the film, it was really hard because the roadies were trying to protect them from us. And, they would get on the bus, and then we would try to get on the bus, and, we wouldn't be allowed. And, finally we had to have like a meeting about, well, if you want this film, we have to get on the bus. But Martin really wrote a lot of the music and had somewhat of a musical background. And Andy had none, and they really literally probably unplugged his keyboard. And Alan was a little bit more middle class. They were maybe lower middle class, and he was, he was a concert musician. I mean, he had studied music, and he was the one who, when Martin would write the songs, a lot of the times he would orchestrate them, and he kind of made this kind of fuller sound that eventually came out of the band.
You briefly touched on this when you said that you were the frontal camera, but how would you divide and sort of coordinate camera coverage when you were shooting something like this?
I mean, we're the opposite of how everything is filmed now, with cranes and, headphones and, somebody in the other room kind of, editing it at the same time it's being done practically. We just had positions, basically, and we've shot a lot that way. I mean, Jim Densman, who actually shot on Monterey Pop and Bowie, he always is a frontal camera. I usually filmed in the front. Penny usually filmed on stage. We had David filming on the side and Nick in the very back. So, we just kind of know how each other shoot, and, to get what's happening as much as you can on, when your roll is going to run out in 10 minutes and Pam is going to run over with the other magazine for us. But yeah, that's basically how it was. But on the road, a lot of times it was just very small. And, sometimes Penny and I would shoot the concert because the sound would be being recorded. For the other behind the scenes stuff, I would take sound and he would shoot.
Clearly the band was very agreeable. And you all work with, clearly the band was very agreeable to you all. There was no attitude amongst them as stars or performers. And I think, the crew and you all fit in just like another part of the group. It worked very well.
They adopted us and we adopted them.
I think there is one last one in the back.
Hi. In terms of like the structure of the film, did you have like a lot of strong ideas going into it, or was it more like you kind of had to open yourself up to the experience when you were filming and then just pull a lot out of it in the editing room?
Yeah, I mean, most of our films are kind of made in the editing. I mean, we shoot them and, come back with all this, all these goodies, and just try to edit, them together to make a story. And we don't really know how it's going to turn out until we're making it. And as I said, on this film, I would have probably cut some of the music in the middle of it, but it wasn't totally my choice. And this film was a work for hire for us by Warner, so we had to work within that.
But also, I think the bus kids, it's a little bit of a crapshoot because we didn't know what we were going to get out of that at all. But Joel and Jeff on there, when they came back with that footage, it was just like, oh God, this stuff is just great.
Yeah,
It
the
was
kids
all-
are
it was
great,
all good.
and they play for the. I mean, they look like not self-conscious, but they clearly are playing for the camera. I mean, it's really surprising.
Yeah, they were amazing. So that came in the backbone in some fashion, somehow.
I mean, in some ways, we had to be careful that they didn't take over the movie because the band's life, they're traveling from one city to another city, and it's not super exciting. And David had a baby and a wife. They didn't come on the whole tour, but they were there, at the very end for a little bit of it, and so there wasn't a huge amount to film. And you don't often get a character like Penny got in Bob Dylan for Don't Look Back. And not everybody can kind of take on that role, but we really loved them in the end. They were really wonderful people, and I think very talented.
But the music held it together. I mean, if the music wasn't any good, there'd be no movie.
Oh yeah, of course.
So that was the critical part.
Well, thank you, Chris. Thank you, Frazer. Thank you for the film, and thank you for coming.